Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. This session is called Interregional Connections for Information Integrity. Across the world, we're seeing both authoritarian government and democratic ones with increasingly alarming tendencies, adopting practices that restrict freedom online. These include laws designed to silence critical voices, political motivated surveillance, and coordinated online operations that distort public opinion, debate, or spread hate. At the same time, platforms still struggle to offer consistent responses, and meaningful cooperation with civil society remains weak. The people pushing back against these threats are activists, journalists, researchers, civic tech groups, and these are often those most affected by this. But they are also operating in environments where sustainability is very difficult, especially now. What we are doing today live is a demonstration that cross-sector collaboration is possible, not only between countries and regions, but also across different branches of civil society. Whether we come from activism, academia, journalism, or other, our shared work on information integrity connects us, and in many cases, protects the civic space. In this session, we will explore 4 key areas where digital authoritarian practices most often appear. The first one will be censorship, blocking or controlling access to online information. The second one will be surveillance, monitoring or intimidating people online. 3 will be online information integrity, spreading false or harmful narratives. And the last one will be internet governance that basically is linked to the policies and systems that shape digital rights. With us, we will have me as a moderator. I'm Venezuelan. I'm a human rights advocate, director of products, a nonprofit working on information integrity in Latin America. Marion Brancesco from Costa Rica. She will be online. She's a digital rights researcher from Products team. Valentina Aguana from Venezuela. She's a system engineer and researcher at Conexión Segura y Libre, works on internet censorship and digital rights. Abdullah Ahmadi from Afghanistan. He is a human rights advocate focused on digital inclusion and civic space. He is the director of Afghanistan Democracy and Development Organization. Lilian Nalonga from Uganda. She is program manager at CIPESA, and she works on internet policy and digital rights in Africa. Estefania da Silva from Venezuela. She is a digital research specialist focused on information manipulation, part of Products team. Sasha Hanim online. She is an international relations analyst and academic focused on authoritarian influence and the impact of science and technology on society. Iria Puyosa from Venezuela and the US. She is senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and Tech Initiative. She's an expert on digital authoritarianism and governance. Roberta Braga from Brazil and the US. She is founder and director of Digital Democracy Institute of the Americas, DDIA, focused on a healthier internet for Latinos across the US and Latin America. And Marta Roldós from Ecuador. She's an investigative journalist, director of Fundación Mil Hojas. And with that, I will start with the first 2 questions regarding censorship. And this will be the following ones. What recent examples of censorship, formal or informal, has affected your country? And what resistant strategies, technical, legal, social, have been effective in countering your censorship? With that, I will leave the floor to Abdullah to his first question, and then to Valentina. Abdullah, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the chance to speak about the situation in Afghanistan, where digital censorship has increased in recent years, and especially the civic space is closed in Afghanistan, based according to the Civicas report. First, about the recent examples. Since the Taliban takeover in August 2021, Afghanistan has experienced both formal and informal censorship. Formally, the Taliban have restricted independent media by imposing new guidelines that ban critical reporting. Many TV channels and radio stations have been forced to close or deeply self-censor to avoid reprisals. Online, the Taliban have ordered internet service providers to block access to certain news websites and social media pages run by exiled Afghan journalists and human rights groups. They also monitor social media for dissenting voices. Informally, intimidation is widespread. Journalists, activists, and even ordinary citizens risk detention or threat if they share information that criticize the regime, especially on Facebook and WhatsApp, which are widely used in Afghanistan. Women voices are especially targeted. Female journalists face not only censorship, but harassment and ban from the working overall. This silencing has had a shocking effect on the flow of the reliable information inside and outside the Afghanistan. Second, about the resistance strategy, about your second question, despite the Afghan citizens and civil society group have found a way to resist. Technically, many people rely on the VPNs to access blocked website and social media platform. Encrypted messaging application like Signal and Telegram have become essentially for activists and journalists to communicate securely and share information without immediate detection. Some exiled Afghan media outlets maintain mirror sites and distribute news through the WhatsApp broadcast list to reach people inside the country. Legally, while there are almost no functioning legal pathway for media freedom under the Taliban rule, regional and international organizations have stepped in. Exiled Afghan journalists collaborate with the international human rights bodies to document press freedom violations, and some cases have been raised at the UN Human Rights Council and other form of the build pressure and protect journalists at risk. Socially, one of the most powerful strategies that have been Solidarity Network, Afghan journalists, especially those now in exile, continue to publish news about the country through the diaspora-run media, podcast, and social media channels. Inside Afghanistan, people have access to this information. We also provide the training on the digital security and censorship escape. This is another strategy that we are using and organizing outside the country, that helping local activists and journalists to protect themselves online and find a safe channel to speak out. In closing, censorship in Afghanistan is part of the broad attack on the human rights. But despite fear and the strict rules, Afghan people continue to resist using technology, solidarity, and international support. I believe it is our responsibility as global community to amplify their voices, share tools and knowledge, and stand with the Afghan defending their right to speak and be heard. Finally, I call for the UN to work towards a legally binding convention on digital rights to protect freedoms like expression, privacy, access to information, and encryption online with a strong safeguard and inclusive governance. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abdullah. Valentina?
Thank you, Mariví. Well, first, thank you. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. And thank you, Abdullah. I think there is a lot of parallelisms that we can see in Afghanistan right now to what is happening in Venezuela. I'm going to specifically talk about internet blogs and how internet blogs are being used as a mechanism for censorship. I believe it's important to also have a clear definition of what an internet block is, and we define it as an intentional technical measure for impeding access to a specific service, website, or information on the internet. The block for us has to be technically measurable. It has to be consistent over time across different access points within the network, and it's also not the result of a technical problem. Therefore, intentional. Invest in Filtro, we have been documenting internet blocks for over 10 years, over a decade, and we have a pretty good understanding about or how the internet landscape in Venezuela and the Latin American region has been changing over the years. Just last year in Venezuela, I believe that entered what I call a new era of internet censorship, one that is more pervasive and completely changes the way that Venezuelans use the internet. We have documented that at least 61 independent media sites or independent media outlets in Venezuela are currently blocked, but the raw number itself doesn't really tell you anything. What we need to understand and we need to know is that this represents practically the whole independent news media ecosystem in the country. So also civil society organizations have also been affected by these blocks. And there are not only news media sites, but fact-checking sites and as said, civil society organizations, NGOs, etc. But apart from this, I think one of the more severe things that we've seen is that since last year, the Venezuelan government has implemented blocks against social media platforms like Reddit, TikTok, X, formerly Twitter, which, by the way, is currently still blocked in the country, and even messaging apps like Signal. We once thought that permanently blocking social medias was a red line for censors, but unfortunately we know that that's not the case anymore, not only in Venezuela, but in different countries. And we have seen this spreading to other countries within the region, citing disinformation and public safety as an excuse for these internet blocks. Another very serious trend that we've seen is the blocking of critical internet infrastructure. We're talking about public DNS servers, like Google servers or Cloudflare's DNS servers, and also CDNs being blocked. We documented last year the block of CloudFront, that's the Amazon Web Services CDN. And as we can imagine, this was a disaster. Millions of sites across the globe relied on CloudFront, and we believe that the intention was not to block the CDN itself, but actually a website using its service. But these cause what we call collateral blocks or collateral censorship. This not only happens in Latin America. Right here in Europe, several ISPs in Spain are currently blocking whole IP ranges from Cloudflare, Akamai, Vercel, among other companies, trying to tackle copyright infringements during soccer match. And you can imagine how crazy it is that half of the internet is down in certain ISPs in Spain when this is happening, like when a soccer match is on. So measures to block content or platforms on the internet, this is very important, must be exceptional, proportional, and the least dramatic as possible, only doing what is necessary, and of course, through a legal process. So in summary, the censors are getting more sophisticated with the blocks, but also more reckless on what they're trying to block. And just like Abdullah said, in what is happening in Afghanistan, in Venezuela, there is not a clear legal path to challenge these blocks. However, multilateral and international organizations are there for a reason, and we need to keep pressuring these because we know that the internet is a human right. So I think this role is very important. Finally, I think that the work of the civil society organization is key. We need to keep doing advocacy. We need to keep teaching about synchronization techniques. However, this is not enough. I think that other traditional solutions are not enough to fight in censorship, and I think the community, we need to invest time and effort and money in new solutions. Privacy by design, but also censorship by design. For example, Noticias Sin Filtro is an app we created as a newsreader app that has a censorship by design approach, which I think this is what we need to do going forward in the future.
Thank you very much, Valentina and Abdullah. And with that, I'll leave the floor with the second topic ahead, that will be surveillance. And the two questions will be, for Marta and for Lilian, what forms of digital surveillance have been used to monitor, intimidate, or silence civil society, journalists, or communities? And how have been affected these groups responded, and what protective practices or tools have emerged? With that, I will leave the floor to Lilian first and Marta as a second.
Thank you, Marivi. Pleasure to be here. I'll try to be brief because this is a conversational session. In terms of forms of digital surveillance, what has been used, I think we've heard from the previous speakers. It's not different from whatever is happening in Africa. We are seeing various forms that are being used to monitor, intimidate, or silence civil society, journalists. And most famous, like everywhere, is phone tapping or internet interception, where governments and, of course, other actors for all the other reasons are using wiretapping, interception of calls, texts, and all that. And interestingly, this is well embedded in the legislation, where we have quite a number of countries that, including where I come from, Uganda, whether it's Tanzania or Kenya, we have interception of communication laws, and with that, governments are mandated to intercept calls wherever they think there is some sort of harm. Also, we've seen deployment of surveillance tools like spyware or malware on people who are targeted, whether it's activists, and we've had reports or seen reports with Citizen Lab releasing quite a lot of research on the use of Pegasus on opposition, but also it's also used in cross-border kind of surveillance where we have politicians being tracked in other countries or activists being tracked in other countries through use of these malware tools. Of course, also targeted social media monitoring, which may have automated bots or filtering and all that. But that surveillance itself, if it was being done for good, and again I put good in quotes, would not be an issue. But what we are seeing is that, yes, governments may want to lawfully have, they have legitimate concerns when it comes to, surveillance, but in most cases, the laws and policies that are putting otherwise say something totally different, especially when it comes to undemocratic countries or countries that are really deep down in repression. So there's a lack of oversight or limited oversight when it comes to, how far they can go with this surveillance. And again, I think that is where the issue is. Just wanted to also maybe highlight the amount of money or resources that are being put in these surveillance tools. And in 2023, there was a research by the Institute of Development Studies that documented about, I can't mention the names because the research is there, countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Morocco, Malawi, and Zambia collectively spent $1 billion US, in a year on digital surveillance tools. And these tools were being supplied by countries, US, UK, China, some countries in the EU, and Israel. And I mean, when you look at this vast amount of money and the state of the countries or what could be used in spending on, doing public kind of, service and all that, that is something that gets you to understand that states are more interested in understanding what is being said against them or, silencing certain, voices than actually having that much money in that. But the other thing maybe that, as I come to the other question is, when we talk about surveillance also, in Africa, we also look at surveillance as a censorship tool, especially when it comes to, content filtering, the network disruptions that we are seeing. That is also one form of, surveillance. And we've been known, like other countries in Asia or in Asia mainly, where internet shutdowns have become a pandemic of its own. And in 2020, last year, over 21 shutdowns were documented. And now you can imagine if you're to connect to the internet, then it will kind of prompt how are you connecting, and then that could also, get into that. So in conclusion on this question is these tactics are usually, they combine technically sophisticated tools that we've already had, which having, legal or extra legal measures that are really being used to suppress dissent. And it also makes detection very difficult for the targeted individuals, because at times, by the time you get to know you're surveilled is probably when you're being arrested, and the content that is shown to you, then that's when you get to find out what is really happening. So this is a growing concern in Africa, and I think it's also now becoming a very global concern when it comes to, rights, especially the right to privacy and freedom of expression and access to information. How are the groups being affected, how they're responding, and practices? I think what we are seeing is a lot of coalition movement building, within the civic space. We have, for instance, for the shutdowns, we have the Keep It On campaign by Access Now. We have associations like Digital Resilience Network, which comprises about 10 organizations that are coming around to, say no, push against this kind of, surveillance. And mainly in East Africa, where I'm coming from, we are seeing there's an organization that I can mention, TATOA, which is in Swahili means solve, brings together organizations to build share tools, conduct capacity building, and all that. And last but not least is researching and documenting and being able to show where surveillance is happening for purposes of policy making, advocacy, and other indicators, have the information there so that we can always push against surveillance. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. With that, I'll leave the floor to Marta. Marta, who is online.
Sorry. I'm connecting. Sorry. Okay. Now I'm ready. Sorry. I would like to say that we have had the same experience that the previous speakers have explained in all those matters. In the case of Ecuador, we have in the matter of surveillance, the questions are surveillance for what? Because we were presented with the idea that surveillance was a tool for security against crime in a country where crime has risen exponentially, while the government was applying these mechanisms of surveillance to journalists, to social to civil society while the narcos were thriving. So surveillance for what? What is the form of sending to the public the idea of surveillance? I explain this because in our country, it has just been approved a new intelligence law that made surveillance actually legal in every aspect of it if it is conducted by the intelligence unit from the governmental intelligence unit. So that's very a huge preoccupation right now. With the new law, we are not having any kind of register of the intelligence operations for history. They are going to be destroyed. And the intelligence unit is going to oversize themselves. So that's a step for the worst in the country right now in the matter of privacy and digital rights. In other aspects that I would like to highlight is that in the past, that's not just now. We have had since Korea's government and this implementation of new systems of surveillance, every type of form of digital surveillance that also was part of a more broad scheme of surveillance in general, also in the real life. So we have had man-in-the-middle attacks. We have had a pack rat. We have had all our dealings with Pegasus, and all these things that are like on trend. Everything that has been trending in the world for surveillance has been used in our country also. No hacking team. It's like it goes like waves, and also almost always, mainly journalists, but also activists have been attacked by these instruments. That's in the things that has been done in Ecuador, not just while during the authoritarian regime from Rafael Correa, but also the governments that came after it. It was like a build capacity of surveillance that the next government, it was very difficult to restrain themselves from using. Um, there was a brief moment of apparently clarity. The CNAIN, which was the intelligence office, was actually uh, closed, but a new office was opened that was called CS, that had allegedly more controls from the state and from the control organisms, but it hasn't worked like that actually.
30
And the
seconds,
problem
Marta,
with
sorry.
surveillance.
30 seconds.
Hello?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Well, that was the first question. In the second question, we have had the what was the affectation? The affectation was that the people were not was just their privacy was exposed, but the problem was that it was weaponized. The information obtained through surveillance was weaponized by the state in the government from Korea's regime uh, to pieces for character assassination in the media, and in the following governments. The problem is that also it didn't obey just to the state. Some non-state actors like narcos had allies in the surveillance community.
Okay, Marta,
So, sorry.
sorry to interrupt. We're done with that point. Thank you very much. We see more similarities, although we are far away. We see the points of encounter. Now we're going to the third point, that will be information integrity. And with that, I will leave the floor to Estefania to talk about this.
Thank you, Mariby. Well, at Provost, we have seen several patterns of disinformation and narrative manipulation on social media in Latin America that have been repeating in several countries. For example, in the case of Venezuela, government entities and members of the cabinet spread manipulated information and launched smear campaigns against their opponents by activating not only bots, but also networks of coordinated users, real people like you and me that create several accounts and replicate the same content spread or promoted by the state with little to no modification. And to incentivize the participation in these activities, individuals are paid with state fund, which is a big issue. And given the country's severe economic situation, this incentive the creation of these networks, because people see this as a side job, so to speak. And the same pattern has been replicated in countries like Cuba and Nicaragua, where the government initiates a disinformation or a smear campaign and coordinated users replicate the content. And it even goes as far as Venezuelan campaigns trending in Cuba or Cuban campaigns trending in Venezuela. And this happened because these governments help each other to amplify these narratives and create the appearance of widespread support or buzz around them. This type of behavior aims to divert the attention from the real events happening in the country, especially given that social media platforms are often used to access unbiased information and to protest against daily occurrences. In fact, the influence and the reach of these platforms are such that there have been cases of people being arrested for social media posts that are contradict the official state narrative. And regarding the second question about the responses that have worked or failed, digital activism has played a vital role in Venezuela. For example, the teachers' union is highly organized in the protest to highlight the wage declines or the breaches of contract, and they combine the digital demonstration with protests on the streets. We can say that these much-needed actions have been met with repressive countermeasures, such as the implementation of laws like the so-called hate law, which criminalizes the protest and is used to justify the arrest. Another thing that is very important, and with this I'll be done, is the independent media outlets and the formation of coalitions with fact-checking teams and initiatives and organizations like Probots that had become essential and pioneering because these actions aim to analyze the digital content, educate the citizens, and on how to identify disinformation or manipulated narratives, and also to promote digital security practices as well as tools like the use of VPNs, for example, to avoid censorship. And this work at the end ensures that even though the traditional media is mainly controlled by the state, there remains access to verified and independent information that reflects the true reality of what's happening in the country.
Thank you very much, Stefania. With that, Sasha, I will ask you to be brief, please.
Yes, I'm gonna stick to my time. Thank you so much for your introduction. So when we talk about information integrity, the question is what information we can trust, right? And when we ask ourselves what types of narratives of manipulation or disinformation are spread in the region, that is a question we actually want to know. And in that regard, I do agree with the previous speakers on cooperation between actors, on the situations in which these campaigns are spread. And I also only want to add a few points upon that. So the first is concerns over disinformation and narrative manipulation not being taken as seriously as they should by decision makers, state actors, maybe civil society to one extent does care about it. But we see again and again examples that when compared to other regions, such as the European Union, in Latin America in general, disinformation is not seen as a security issue. It's seen as a distortion of information spreading. As a result, there is many ways in which information is spread. Some of these have already been mentioned. And I would only want to add to the first question, how important is the context? Because when we have disasters, when we have uncertainty, when we have political unrest, when we have domestic controversial issue, those are the areas in which these campaigns thrive. And these are the areas with not only state actors such as Russia or China or any other authoritarian actor or any other actor with an agenda thrives, but also untraceable, independent disinformation spreaders. So regarding the second questions, what responses from the civil society, media, and academia or institutions have worked or failed in restoring narrative integrity? I think there is a lot of work being done by civil society in the region that is obvious, that is strong. The region's, as I mentioned, is a little bit behind in counter-narrative operation or disinformation responses, but we do see a raising awareness. And this raising awareness has created a door for discussion, which in some cases has translated into actual responses. And I just want to mention one case with the 15 seconds I have left.
Excuse me, I will have to to stop you here. Yeah, sorry, the time was up, but I will leave it that way, and I will move forward with the last two questions. The first one will be for Roberta, and the second one for Iria. Please do 3 minutes each, and we will finish with that. Thank you very much, Roberta.
Thank you, Mariví. Good morning, everybody from DC. So the two countries I can speak most closely to are the United States and Brazil, my two home countries. And here we're talking about models of governance that the region has been implementing. And I think, as we know, in the United States, there really are no central governance mechanisms for things like data privacy, internet governance. And so by default, not only do the states sort of make a lot of the laws, which can really lead to some decentralization, some difficulties for businesses in adhering to this, some inadequate enforcement, and some diversity in approaches between states. But we also see that the United States prioritizes at its core tenet freedom of speech, which by default puts governance mechanisms almost entirely in the hands of social media platforms. In the US this year, we're seeing that a lot of the social media companies have moved toward a community-driven mode of content moderation, which I think has its pros and cons and has been really hotly debated here in Washington, D.C. and in California and other places. That model has been tried by X, as we know, and actually our team at DDIA downloaded 1.7 million tweets in English and Spanish, notes in English and Spanish dating back to 2021, and we'll share some findings of that on July 9th if you're interested. But that model really hasn't met a need for addressing online harms in real time. For example, it takes 14 days for a note to go from submission to publication on average. And then Brazil, my other home country, has really taken a bit of a different approach. Brazil has the Marco Civil da Internet, which is almost our digital civil Bill of Rights. And it really pushes for net neutrality and privacy and freedom of expression, as well as data protection really at its core. It's something that needs to be updated and is being discussed now. And then we have our general data protection law, which I think really mirrors the European GDPR, emphasizes user privacy and data protection. But there's a lot more that needs to be done, I think, for us to really give these types of mechanisms the teeth they need to ensure our safety online. So Mariví, I will leave it at that. I know we're short on time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. With that, Iria.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm going to try to be very brief. One of the issues I'm concerned about at the moment is the pressures the civil society organizations, digital rights organizations, and internet governance organizations are facing, given the pressures from the current geopolitical dynamics and pressures over the multi-stakeholder internet governance model due to the change on the global digital company I'm bringing up. And I'm also particularly interested in the way these dynamics are playing on Latin America, Africa, and Asia organizations who are also facing a sharp decline of funding available for the kind of work they are doing. The kind of work my colleagues in the panel have been talking about: censorship, circumvention, disinformation, content disinformation, looking protecting the data, personal data, content surveillance, all that very important words, as well as a multi-stakeholder governance role the civil society organizations play. Is in danger is because of the lack of sustainability in the long term for these kind of organizations, particularly for smaller organizations in the global south who are losing critical expertise due to the lack of funding. And I think this is a conversation we should be having in the Internet Governance Forum, because even though it's not related with the core resources of the internet infrastructure, is core to the internet governance model. So we want to have a multi-stakeholder model of governance, it requires the presence of civil society organizations. And civil society organizations, says to exist, is no way for us to defend the multi-stakeholder model, and it's going to be a model run only by states, big corporations. So the survival of the internet multi-stakeholder model of governance is tied to the survival of sustainability of civil society organizations working on this space. That is why my team in the Atlantic Council Democracy and Tech Initiative is aiming to have a systemic assessment of the support need of these kind of organizations working in digital rights and internet governance. And we are exploring the way to partner with philanthropic donors and right-aligned states in order to identify mechanisms for channeling resources towards civil society organizations. This is part of the mission we are focused on the coming year, try to understand ways to support the needs of civil society organizations in Africa, Latin America, and South Asia, developing countries working in meaningful access to internet connectivity, digital public infrastructure, and internet and data governance. To end, very, very concrete recommendations for governments and funders, it's important for them to strengthen capabilities for prioritizing partnerships with local civil society in the countries of the Global South, Latin America, Asia, and Africa, particularly those organizations working in key areas like connectivity, meaningful connectivity, artificial intelligence, linking to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is very, very important for the Global South, particularly for African countries, all the issues of data governance and the internet governance itself. For the civil society organization, initial recommendations is to try to work together, exploring the ways we can foster South-South collaboration in order for organizations from Latin America and Africa or Africa and Asia get projects, joint projects, because we are seeing in this conversation where the issues are similar in our regions, but small organizations were isolated, and having coalitions working together would be helpful in order to make the most for the scarce resources we have right now. It will help this organization, this kind of partnership, to collectively navigate this geopolitical shift and this change on the global internet governance brought by the Global Digital Compact new state of play. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iria, and everyone online and in person. I will leave just two brief questions. Do you believe, for everyone on the audience, in person and online, do you believe that there is at least one authoritarian trend in your country? Say yes with the hand.
Sure.
I see all of us have some, and I see from the audience that there's two. And did you learn something about a tactic, idea, or alliance that you can use today for your own country? In my case, which I did. Some from the audience too. I'm happy to see that. Well, with that, I will close because we don't have more time. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the ones online and in person. By listening each other, sharing concrete experiences, and reflecting across countries' role and challenges, we have shown that cooperation to protect information integrity is not just possible, it's already happening. And this session, this event in general, remind us that resisting online authoritarian practices for a healthier and safer internet for all is not just about identifying the problems, but it's also about building these bridges that we were talking about. Bridges between regions, between diverse stakeholders, and between different areas of civil society that are the one leading this fight every day. Let's carry these ideas forward and keep this collaboration alive. Thank you very much.